see what we got. She was tortured, drilled, and murdered on her way to school. Damn. Let's see what happened.
My baby didn't have a chance. No grandchildren. Can't walk her down the aisle.
Heartbreak and anger from a family who lost their little girl too soon. A judge sentenced Eliana DeFreeze's killer to death today.
Stupid.
Christopher Whitaker killed the 14-year-old last year, kidnapping her on her way to school. Good evening. I'm Sarah Schuckman.
I'm Chris Talion for Rush Tonight. Aliana's body showed sign of torture and rape. Tonight, her parents think the punishment of death is too kind. They wanted him to suffer life behind bars.
This is the abandoned building where Aliana's body was found on January 26th.
People be saying that they'd rather get life in jail, and then what happens when they fuck around and get good behavior because they turned their life around after 20 years and now they got a chance of getting out. You should have just had them killed, man. Just let them go ahead and get up out of here, because you're going to be mad as a motherfucker 20 years later. They fuck around and get out. You know what I'm saying? So,
2017,
I don't know.
14-year-old Aliana DeFreeze kissed her mom goodbye and left for school in Cleveland, Ohio.
How old she was again?
She caught her usual bus at 6:45 in the morning. Security cameras captured her getting off at her transfer stop, but she never made it onto the second bus. 3 days later, police found her body in an abandoned house. What they discovered there was so brutal that even her neighbors cried out in pain. And who was responsible? A registered sex offender who should never have been walking free.
That's why they be warning people. They got all these alerts and shit. They warn you about these sex offenders, because you can take that shit light if you want, but that shit get real. Anybody who's a sex offender, their mind is really fucked up and twisted, and if they did it once, they
His
most likely
confession
do it
will
again.
make your blood run cold. Welcome to our channel. Every day, completely unaware that predators are watching and waiting for the perfect moment. The system failures that cost innocent lives. Then please like this. And Aliana never missed that schedule. Their neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it felt safe enough. Families had been living there for years. Kids walked to school every day, and parents trusted it like any other day for the DeFreeze family. Aliana woke up around 6 a.m., got dressed, and grabbed her backpack. Her mom, Denisha, was getting ready for work, and they shared their usual morning routine. Nothing felt different. Nothing seemed wrong. That morning, Aliana walked to her bus stop at East 93rd and Kinsman, right on schedule. The security cameras in the area captured her getting on that first bus just like she did every school day. She looked completely normal. Backpack over her shoulder, ready for another day of classes. The bus took her to her transfer point at East 79th and Kinsman, where she needed to catch a second bus to get to school. This is where the cameras captured something that still gives investigators nightmares. When Aliana stepped off her first bus that morning, she wasn't alone at that stop. A man was already there, pacing back and forth like he was waiting for something. Or someone. The cameras show Aliana walking toward the second bus stop, but then something made her stop. She turned around and looked at this man.
Now, if he on the bus with her, he gonna grab her and what? You can't put her in a car. You ain't got no car or nothing. So you gonna grab her and hold her all the way till you get to an abandoned house? That's crazy.
Was still pacing. You can see her hesitate. Then she takes 2 steps backward, away from him. That man was Christopher Whitaker, a 44-year-old registered sex offender.
He down bad.
And those 2 steps backward that Aliana took, they showed that her instincts were screaming at her that something was wrong. She knew she was in danger, but it was too late. What happened next isn't captured on camera, but we know that Whitaker approached Aliana. We know he convinced her to come with him somehow. Maybe he threatened her, maybe he lied to her, maybe he used her trusting nature against her. Whatever he said, it worked. Aliana never got on that second bus. She never made it to school that day. Back home, Denisha went about her normal routine. She went to work expecting that when she got home at 4 p.m., Aliana would be there waiting for her, probably doing homework or watching TV. But 4 p.m. came and went. No Aliana. At first, Denisha wasn't too worried. Maybe Aliana had stayed after school for something, or maybe she was walking home with friends. But as the minutes ticked by, that worry started growing into something much worse. By early evening, Denisha was calling Aliana's phone over and over. No answer. She started calling friends and family members, asking if anyone had seen her daughter. Then came the phone call that every parent dreads. Denisha called the school to ask if Aliana had stayed late for any reason. The person on the other end of the line checked the attendance records and delivered news that made Denisha's world collapse. She never showed up today. Those 5 words changed everything. Aliana hadn't been at school all day. She'd been missing for almost 10 hours and nobody knew. This is where the system failed Aliana in the worst possible way. Most schools have policies about calling parents when kids don't show up, especially kids with... Schools have policy system failed Aliana.
Why the hell did they got basketball goals in the middle of a look like a cafeteria or something?
In the worst possible way, especially kids with special needs like Aliana. But somehow no one from her school had called to check on her. If Denisha had gotten a call that morning saying Aliana wasn't in class, she could have started looking for her immediately. The police could have been notified right away. Those crucial first hours, when finding a missing person is most likely, wouldn't have been wasted. Instead, Aliana had been in the hands of a predator for almost half a day before anyone even knew she was gone. Denisha immediately called 911. She told them everything: when Aliana left, where she was supposed to go, the fact that she'd never missed school without calling. The police took the report seriously and started searching right away. But Christopher Whitaker had already had hours with Aliana. Hours to take her wherever he wanted. Hours to do whatever he planned to do. And what he had planned was worse than anyone could have imagined. The search team spread out across Cleveland, checking every place a 14-year-old girl might go. They talked to her friends, her teachers, anyone who might have seen her. They pulled security camera footage from every business along her bus route, but Aliana was nowhere to be found. What do you think happened in those missing hours? Drop your theories in the comments below. For 3 saw him, Christopher Whitaker, pacing back and forth at the bus stop like a predator stalking his prey. The cameras captured the moment Aliana hesitated, those 2 steps backward that showed her instincts screaming danger. And then they saw Whitaker approach her. But the cameras couldn't show what happened next. They couldn't show how he convinced her to come with him, what lies he told her, what threats he made. All they knew was that Aliana never got on that second bus, and she was last seen walking away with a man who had no business being near a child. Police immediately began searching for Whitaker, but he seemed to have vanished. They checked his known addresses, talked to his family members, and put out alerts to every officer in the city, but Cleveland is a big place with thousands of abandoned buildings, empty lots, and places where someone could hide a kidnapped child. Right. For 3 days, the search continued. Denisha barely slept, barely ate.
But you got
She
his
spent
face
every
for,
waking moment either out
look
looking for Aliana herself or sitting by the phone, hoping for news. The community rallied around the family, organizing search parties and distributing open, even though it should have been secured. Anything. This felt like just another empty building to check off their list. But as they got closer to the front door, they noticed something that made their blood run cold. The door was slightly open, even though it should have been secured. There were signs that someone had been there recently. The officers called for backup before entering. They knew that if Aliana was inside, they might also be walking into a trap. If her kidnapper was still there, they needed to be ready for anything. When they finally entered the house, they had to use flashlights because there was no electricity. The house was dark, cold, and filled with the smell of decay and neglect.
That house really looked like this.
But as they moved through the rooms, their lights picked up something that made their stomachs turn.
I'm pretty sure this
blood,
wasn't a building, though.
Lots of it. There were bloody footprints leading from the front of the house toward the back, smears of blood on the walls, as if someone had been dragged or had stumbled while bleeding. The officers followed the trail, their hearts pounding, knowing that whatever they found at the end of it would be something they'd never forget. The trail led to a bedroom at the back of the house. The door was closed, and there was more blood around the frame. One of the officers took a deep breath and kicked the door open. What they found inside that room was beyond anything they had prepared themselves for. In the corner, in a pool of blood, was Aliana's body. She was naked except for her socks, Her clothes scattered around the room like discarded trash. But it wasn't just that she was dead. It was how she had died. The officers could see immediately that she had been tortured. There were wounds all over her body, injuries that could only have been made by tools. Her face was so damaged that it was almost unrecognizable. Scattered around the room were the tools that had been used on her. A drill, a hammer, a box cutter, a screwdriver, all of them covered in blood. All of them evidence of the hours of torture that Aliana had endured before she finally died. Even the most experienced officers at the scene had to step outside to compose themselves. Some of them threw up. Others just stood there in shock, unable to process what they had seen. This wasn't just a murder, this was something evil, something that went beyond anything they had encountered in their careers. A 14-year-old girl with special needs had been tortured to death by a monster who had been walking free in their community. The crime scene team worked for hours, documenting everything, collecting evidence, trying to piece together exactly what had happened in that room. But everyone who was there that day knew that some images would never leave their minds. Aliana DeFries had been found, but not the way anyone had hoped. The search was over, but the real work, finding her killer and making him pay, was just beginning. The moment investigators found Aliana's body, their focus shifted from rescue to justice. They had a crime scene that told a horrific story, but they needed to find the monster responsible. Fortunately, they already had their biggest clue, those security cameras that had captured everything. The footage clearly showed Christopher Whitaker at the bus stop, pacing like a predator waiting for prey. His face was visible, his movements were recorded, and there was no doubt that he was the last person seen with Aliana before she disappeared. Police immediately put out a manhunt for Whitaker. They had his photo, they knew his criminal history, and they knew he was dangerous. What they discovered about his past made their blood boil and raised serious questions about how he was even walking free. Christopher Whitaker was 44 years old and had been a registered sex offender since 2005. 12 years earlier, he had brutally attacked a woman, beating her so severely that she nearly died. He had served time for that attack, but clearly prison hadn't changed him. If anything, it had made him worse. The system had failed before Aliana was even born. Whitaker should have been locked up for life after that 2005 attack. Instead, he was released back into the community, free to hunt for his next victim. And when he saw Aliana at that
people
bus
like
stop,
him who don't even deserve a second chance. But they got some people who niggas be like, fuck man, that man deserve a second chance. But niggas like him, pedophilia, raping children, murder, shit like that, you don't deserve no second chance. But drug charges and little stupid shit, like, come on, man. But this nigga here,
a vulnerable 14-year-old with special needs, he saw the perfect target. It took police 2 days to track Whitaker down. They found him at a relative's house, acting like nothing had happened. When they arrested him, he didn't resist.
What, man? What's going on,
he just looked
man?
at the officers with dead eyes, like he knew his time was up. The interrogation began immediately. Detectives sat across from Whitaker in a small room, knowing they were face to face with someone who had tortured a child to death. They had to stay professional, but inside, they wanted to tear him apart. At first, Whitaker tried to lie. He claimed he didn't know anything about Aliana, said he'd never seen her before, insisted he had nothing to do with her disappearance. But the detectives had the security footage. They had witnesses who placed him at the scene. His lies fell apart within minutes. When confronted with the evidence, Whitaker's story started changing. First, he admitted he had seen Aliana at the bus stop, but claimed he never talked to her. Then he said maybe they had a brief conversation, but nothing more. Each lie was more pathetic than the last. The detectives knew they had him, but they needed a confession. They needed him to admit what he had done to Aliana, not just for the case, but for her family. They deserved to know the truth, no matter how horrible it was. Finally, after hours of questioning, Whitaker broke down. The weight of the evidence, the pressure from the detectives, and maybe even a tiny bit of guilt finally got to him. Everybody's gonna hate me now, he said.
The world is gonna hate me now, and
nigga, you should have thought of that when you did it.
She never had a chance to grow up. Never had a chance to experience anything.
So why you did it, nigga?
I took that away from her, and There's nothing I can do to bring her back.
Whitaker admitted that he had approached Aliana at the bus stop, telling her he needed help finding something. He used her trusting nature against her, convincing her to come with him to the abandoned house on Fuller Avenue. Once he got her inside, Whitaker's true nature emerged. He told detectives that he had planned to rob her, thinking she might have money or something valuable. But when he realized she had nothing, his anger exploded into something much worse. The details of what he did to Aliana in that house are almost too horrible to repeat. He tortured her for hours using tools he found in the abandoned building: a drill, a hammer, a box cutter, a screwdriver. He inflicted wounds all over her body, causing unimaginable pain and suffering. Aliana fought for her life. The crime scene showed signs of a struggle, evidence that she tried to escape, tried to defend herself. But she was just a 14-year-old girl with special needs, and Whitaker was a grown man with nothing but evil in his heart. When detectives asked him why he had done such horrible things to an innocent child, Whitaker's response showed just how twisted he really was.
I was so high, and I was so out of my mind, and it was like I was out of character, and I got what I got coming, and I deserve it.
That was his explanation for torturing a child to death. He was high on drugs and thought he might get some money out of it, as if that could possibly justify what he had done to Aliana. But the confession wasn't enough for prosecutors. They needed physical evidence that would guarantee a conviction. Fortunately, Whitaker had left plenty of it behind. DNA evidence from the crime scene matched Whitaker perfectly. His fingerprints were all over the tools used to torture Aliana. His blood was mixed with hers on the floor of that bedroom. There was no doubt that he was the killer. The forensic evidence painted a clear picture of what had happened in that house. Aliana had been tortured for hours before she finally died. The medical examiner would later testify that she had suffered more than 30 separate injuries, each one designed to cause maximum pain. Whitaker had shown no mercy to a child who had never hurt anyone in her life. He had taken someone's daughter, someone's granddaughter, and turned her final hours into a nightmare that no human being should ever endure. As the investigation wrapped up, one thing became crystal clear. Christopher Whitaker was a monster who deserved no sympathy, no second chances, and no mercy. He had destroyed an innocent life and shattered a family forever. The only question now was whether the justice system would finally do what it should have done years ago: make sure that Christopher Whitaker never had the chance to hurt another child again. The case was solid, the evidence was overwhelming, and the confession was recorded. All that was left was to make him pay for what he had done to Aliana DeFries. When Christopher Whitaker's trial began, the courtroom was packed. Aliana's family sat in the front row, ready to face the monster who had destroyed their lives. They wanted to look him in the eye as justice was finally served. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They had security footage, DNA evidence, fingerprints, and Whitaker's own confession. But they also had something else: testimony that would make even the strongest people in that courtroom break down in tears. The medical examiner took the stand and described what had been done to Aliana in that abandoned house. Her testimony was so graphic, so detailed, that several jurors had to look away. She explained how Aliana had suffered more than 30 separate injuries, each one inflicted while she was still alive. The tools found at the scene told the story of Aliana's final hours. A drill had been used to create wounds in her body. A hammer had been used to beat her. A box cutter had sliced through her skin. A screwdriver had been driven into her flesh. Each tool was covered in her blood, each one evidence of the torture she had endured. What made it even worse was that the medical examiner testified that Aliana had been conscious for most of the attack. She had felt every moment of pain, every act of violence. She had died slowly, in agony, calling out for her mother who couldn't save her. The defense team knew they had an impossible case. There was no way to argue that Whitaker was innocent. The evidence was too strong, his confession too clear. So they tried a different approach. They begged the jury to spare his life, claiming he was mentally ill, that his drug addiction had made him do terrible things. But the jury wasn't buying it. They had seen the crime scene photo him to spare his life. So they tried a different approach. The evidence was too strong, his confession too clear. So they tried a different approach. They begged the jury to spare his life, claiming he was mentally ill, that death was the only appropriate punishment. He called Whitaker a predator who had shown no mercy to an innocent child and deserved none in return. But the most powerful moments came when Aliana's family was allowed to speak. Her mother, Danisha, stood up and looked at had been cut short. It's a simple rule that could save lives by ensuring that missing children are reported quickly.
Bro,
the law also
sad,
requires
bro.
better monitoring of abandoned.
Like I said, humans, it seems like it ain't no hope for humans. They get worse and worse every day, bro. Like, comment, and subscribe. We gonna go on to the next one, man. I ain't got
Don't do it for the bar, just do it for the bar, just do it for the bar, do it.